Just a few years ago, Demaryius Thomas was one of those guys that came to mind when you thought of some of the best wide receivers in football. For about a 4 or 5 year stretch, Thomas was the model of consistency, never missed any games, and even had 4 straight seasons of over 1,300 receiving yards, which is incredibly difficult to do. He has not appeared in an NFL game since 2019, and it feels like he pretty much fell off the face of the earth. So as we go back and reflect on his great career, I'll try to answer what happened to Demaryius Thomas. Thomas attended Georgia Tech as a business management major from 2006 to 2009. He redshirted in 2006 but played from 2007 to 2009 and accumulated over 2,300 receiving yards and 15 touchdowns in 3 seasons. It honestly would have been great to see him play in 2006 and pair him up with Calvin Johnson, but unfortunately that was not the case. Even in a run-heavy scheme under new head coach Paul Johnson, who arrived in 2008, Thomas still found a way to thrive regardless. Coming off a 1,154-yard receiving season, 8 touchdowns, and a first-team All-ACC redshirt junior season, he entered the NFL draft but broke his foot and could not participate in any combine or pro day activities. Despite all of that, he was the first wide receiver taken off the board at 22nd overall to the Denver Broncos in the 2010 NFL draft. There was a debate amongst Demaryius Thomas and Dez Bryant on who should be selected first, but Thomas beat him out just by a couple of spots. A few picks later, the Broncos selected Jaguars tight end Tim Tebow as their quarterback, and that's probably the last thing you want to see as a receiver entering the league. Here he was coming out of a run-heavy scheme in college and now had to deal with Tim Tebow throwing him the ball as well at the next level. In his NFL debut, Thomas had his best game all season, going for 8 catches, 97 yards, and a touchdown with Kyle Orton as his quarterback. He dealt with numerous injuries as a rookie, only playing in 10 games, but there was enough there to say, hey, that Thomas kid's actually pretty legit. In his first NFL offseason, he tore his Achilles, and it was announced that he would miss the majority of the 2011 season, if not the entire thing. But somehow, Thomas miraculously recovered faster than anyone expected, and he made it back for week 7. He scored a touchdown in his first game back, he had a monster game at Minnesota about a month later, and overall had a very strong finish about the final month and a half of the season. The Broncos made the playoffs, and this is where Thomas really got his name on the map, putting up over 200 yards against a really good Steelers defense, including an 80-yard game-winning touchdown in overtime. Now, while the Broncos got blown out the next round by New England, Thomas still did his part with 6 receptions and 93 yards in their last game of the season. Through his first 2 seasons, Thomas was yet to have a season of over 600 yards and dealt with injuries, but things were about to change. That same offseason, the Broncos signed future Hall of Fame quarterback Peyton Manning, which going from Tim Tebow to Peyton Manning has to be the definition of a night and day difference. There were some questions about Peyton coming off the serious neck injury, but as we know, the Broncos did some special things the next few seasons offensively, and Demaryius Thomas was right in the middle of it. Year 3 for wide receivers is the usual breakout year, and Thomas did just that, going over 1,400 yards and nearly 100 catches and 10 touchdowns. In week 5, he set his regular season personal best in yards in a game with 180 versus New England. He received his first Pro Bowl honor, made the NFL Top 100 list at number 68, and was 4th in receiving yards in the NFL that season. He had a very similar stat line the next year in 2013, putting up 92 catches for 1,430 yards, but this time had 14 receiving touchdowns. He won the AFC Offensive Player of the Week in Week 10, putting up 121 yards versus Kansas City in a winning effort. Throughout the playoffs that year, Thomas dominated, averaging 9 catches and 102 yards per game. That was on average. He set an NFL record at the time with 13 receptions in the Super Bowl versus Seattle, but they unfortunately lost big time, 43-8. By this point, Thomas was 4 years in and put his name in that top 5 receivers in the game discussion. In 2014, Thomas had his best season statistics-wise, putting up 111 catches, 1,619 receiving yards, and 11 receiving touchdowns. He started off that year pretty slow, but a 226-yard and 2 touchdown game versus Arizona put him right back on track and set the tone for the rest of the season. They did lose in the divisional round that year to the Colts, but Thomas had 59 yards and a touchdown in that losing effort. In 2015, the Broncos had below average quarterback play between Peyton Manning in his final year and Brock Osweiler, but once again Thomas continued his run of consistency, putting up 105 catches, 1,304 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns, while his quarterbacks combined for only a 77 quarterback rating. In the playoffs that year, Thomas was surprisingly quiet considering what he's done in the past. He totaled only 60 yards in 3 games, including 1 reception for 8 yards in the Super Bowl. In Thomas's first Super Bowl, he lit up the stat sheet but lost. This time he barely contributed but won it all, and based on a quote he once had in college about not needing targets and just wanting to win, I'm sure he was very satisfied about this outcome. After Peyton Manning's retirement, Thomas saw a slight dip in production but still played at a pretty high level the next 2 seasons. 2016 resulted in his 5th straight season of over 1,000 1,000 yards and his 4th Pro Bowl in 5 seasons as well. He had a 90-catch, 1,083-yard, and 5-touchdown season, which is still very good, but not what we're accustomed to seeing from Thomas, who had 4 straight seasons of over 1,300 yards at that point. Denver would go on to miss the playoffs that season at 9-7, and in 2017 they would do the same thing, but this time with a 5-11 record. At quarterback that season, the Broncos tried Trevor Siemian, Brock Osweiler returned for 4 games to start, and future first-round bust Paxton Lynch got 2 starts as well. The quarterback play hurt Thomas's numbers enough to get him below that 1,000-yard threshold for the first time in 6 seasons, finishing with an 83-catch, 949 yards, and 5 touchdown line, which is still pretty good for most players. But in 2018, now at 31 years old, we started to see the lack of separation really start to affect him. Denver had a new quarterback in Case Keenum who never really worked out in Denver, and Thomas put up only 50 receiving yards per game in his first 8 games before being traded to the Texans. The man that was once the first-round pick of the Broncos in 2010 had played his last game for them 8.5 years later. Despite all of that, Thomas still had a tremendous career in Denver, breaking countless records and still remained second all-time in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns, just trailing Rod Smith in both categories. He was essentially traded for a 4th-round pick halfway through 2018 and put up only 275 yards in 7 games for the Texans. He was no longer the lead guy with DeAndre Hopkins on the team, but in fact was probably brought in to replace Will Fuller, who was just placed on injured reserve right before that. He actually had to play his first game as a Houston Texan in Denver, which is probably as awkward as it gets for a player. Anyway, Houston did finish 11-5, and that was good enough for the playoffs, but Thomas did suffer his 2nd career Achilles tear and was done for the season. Last time he recovered quickly but had youth on his side. This time he was 31 years old, had a ton of miles on his body at this point, but Thomas decided to keep trying and play. On February 12th of 2019, Thomas was released by the Texans, and just a couple weeks later he was arrested with charges of vehicle assault, driving without proof of insurance, and reckless driving, according to NFL.com. He was reportedly driving 70 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour roadway, and one of his 2 passengers sustained serious injuries to her body, but they all made it out alive. Thomas was released on a $2,000 bail, and with this happening, along with the Achilles tear at 31 years old, the future was not looking bright for him. He did avoid suspension and actually signed with the New England Patriots to later reunite with the man who drafted him in Josh McDaniels, who was the offensive coordinator for the Patriots. Coming off the injury, Thomas only played in 1 preseason game that year, but made the most out of it, putting up a 7-catch, 87-yard, and 2-touchdown performance. He did not make the final 53-man roster for New England, however, he was brought back a few days later, but did miss week 1 with a hamstring injury. Before he could even suit up for the Patriots, he was traded to the Jets for a 2021 6th-round pick. Thomas was clearly not happy about this, saying it was disrespectful, and basically said the Patriots wasted his time and he could have signed with the Jets the first time after the Patriots cut him. Now, maybe New England was being honest and Bill Belichick said he was, but the Patriots were probably not expecting to sign Antonio Brown right before that. If the Patriots did not sign Brown, there was a good chance Thomas would have stayed, but as we know, Antonio Brown was the better player at that time and it was worth taking the risk. It just did not work out for both sides. But in 2019, at age 32, Thomas played in 11 games for the Jets, putting up 36 catches, 433 yards, and 1 touchdown, which was not awful, but definitely showed he was not a top 5 receiver anymore. 2019 was the last time he appeared in an NFL game, but there were rumors that Thomas wanted to come back and finish his career with the Denver Broncos. Thomas made a radio appearance in 2020's offseason saying he still kept in touch with Courtland Sutton, the young wide receiver for the Broncos, and still wanted to play for them, even if he was not going to be a wide receiver 1 for the team. Thomas did say he would go quote-unquote nowhere else, meaning that it was probably the Denver Broncos or nothing in terms of his playing career. And as we fast forward a year later, obviously Denver did not feel the same way, as Thomas remains a free agent and did not even try out for a team last season. Even on social media, Thomas has been quiet, having not posted on Instagram since January of 2020, which was about a month after he last played for the Jets. It seems like based on Broncos fans' comments, they would love to have him back, but the team did not see eye to eye, I guess, on that one. I don't really see him getting back in the NFL, especially now at the age of 33, and there's no signs of him making a comeback. He does have a family to look after. As of 2016, he had 2 younger sisters and a father that was formerly in the Army. His mother and grandmother were actually in prison for non-violent narcotics trafficking, but President Obama reduced their sentences, and Demaryius was able to be with them again for the first time since they were taken away when he was 11 years old. Thomas would end up writing a letter to President Obama thanking him for helping out his family. As for what's next for Demaryius, that's a wait and see. I do think he needed a couple more really good years to be in the Hall of Fame, but his 9,763 receiving yards and 63 touchdowns for his career is nothing to be ashamed of. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a like and subscribe if you did, and I'll talk to you guys next time.